Hello and welcome to Reportage. This is Danish bin Nabi. In today's segment of Reportage, I shall have a discussion about the migration of Kashmiri Pandits in early 90s. What led to the migration of Kashmiri Pandits and who was responsible for such a tragedy? And to discuss about this issue, I have with me Mr. Vijay Bakaya. He was one of those officials during that era who was into thick of things at that time. Mr. Bakaya, welcome to Reportage.
Thank you.
Mr. Bakaya, let me begin by asking you what led to the migration of Kashmiri Pandits in early 90s?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because you can't pinpoint any one reason. And that's why many political parties and social activists and members of the intelligentsia are asking that a commission be established to find out the reasons. But on the face of it, it came as a sudden convulsion in society. The thought that Kashmir could become a Nizam Mustafa began to be spread by certain people, and people came out in the streets asking for Nizam Mustafa, and many thousands of people joined those processions that were taken out. And on 19 January, which is important date for migration, from all mosques, you see, and that's recorded. There were shouts coming out. People were inside the mosques. And in some mosques, it was taped, asking the Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmiri to leave, but to leave their ladies behind. And the situation was so bad that all the hard-nosed bureaucrats, police officers, didn't know how to handle it because lakhs of people were on the roads and the system had almost collapsed. And these Kashmiri Pandits who are leaderless were frightened, and there was no one to stop them when they started leaving at night for Jammu. Before that, 2 or 3 killings had taken place to give a signal. Mr. Tiklal Tupru had been killed in 89 September. Neelkant Ganju had been killed. Tiklal Tupru was vice president of the BJP, and Neelkant Ganju was the session judge who had written a verdict against Makbul.
Mr. Bakaya, were these killings, these two particular killings, religious killings or political killings?
No, you see, Neelkant Ganju was killed because he had sentenced Makbul Bhatt to death.
So means it was not a religious killing.
I wouldn't say that. It was only a coincidence that Mr. Neelkant Ganju was a Kashmiri Pandit, belonging to a particular community or a religion. But the motivation seems to have been to take revenge against...
From the Pandit community.
From Neelkant Ganju. But the killing of Tiklal Taplu was definitely a political killing because he belonged to the RSS. He belonged to the BJP. And the kind of radicalization that had started coming in, that got directed towards such people, and he was killed in broad daylight.
But what led to that radicalization?
What led to that radicalization?
Yes.
Well, that's a very difficult question, which will have to have a very comprehensive answer. But
you were part of the administration at that time.
I was the divisional commissioner in
Jammu, and part of the administration.
Yes, later on.
Yes, later on. Let me again rephrase my question. What led to that radicalization? Something must have been brewing which led to that radicalization.
Well, I think all over the world, a sudden phenomenon had started becoming evident. The jihadi sentiment in Islam. And that found its way into Kashmir through the machinations of our neighbor, Pakistan. Mr. Ziaul Haq had hatched Operation Topaz, which meant that youth should be brought into Kashmir and trained and sent back. And probably he sensed that at that time there was unrest among the young youth in the 90s because while there was governance, there was a feeling that there is discrimination and that there is corruption and that people who are worthy are not getting their due. So that became the fodder for this unrest, which was exploited. And then there was the Afghan war had come to an end. All the guns and Kalashnikovs from Afghanistan had infiltrated into Pakistan, along with the mercenaries who were fighting in Afghanistan. And Ziaul Haq got the ready wherewithal to arm these people, youngsters who came back. So they were asked to fight to give freedom to a population which already was free. And they were indoctrinated to believe that there was oppression and that a wrong decision was taken in August 1947. In October 1947, when the instrument of accession was signed, that accession should have been with the majority Muslim state as per the Dominion Act, but it happened with a Hindu majority state, not with a contiguous state. So, to correct that wrong, that was a feeling that had been uh, given to the youngsters.
Many put the blame on the Kashmiri Muslims that they did not protect their neighbors. How true are these assertions?
Well, I don't think they could have done that, but there are sterling instances of neighbors helping them to leave because they were themselves helpless because a storm had engulfed the whole valley. There was a convulsion. People were out on the streets, and the kind of slogans that were heard were unprecedented, you know, and it was a frightening crescendo of noise that rent the air at that time, and everyone was trying to save his life and try to understand what was happening. But I was a divisional commissioner here when this exodus started. I found that people from the valley in Kashmiri Pandits were coming in, and because I belonged to their community as divisional commissioner, they would park their vehicles outside my official residence, and then I had to think of what to do with them. And while this was happening, they told me that they get anonymous phone calls, you better leave. There are posters being pasted asking us to leave. And from the mosques, they're saying Kashmiri Pandit men should leave and leaving behind their women.
And you do have the evidence
Yes, news track.
of exactly this
Yeah,
phrase.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can leave behind your
Yeah,
women.
yeah. News track was Mr. Raghuvanshi was one person, reporter, journalist who used to prepare what you call the news track, video recorded presentation of what was happening in various areas. And those are the evidence. They must be in the archives. And I witnessed the fact that and I was told by people that this was happening. News track is in the archives. And, you know, when I heard from these people who came here, that this was happening, I wondered why they shouldn't have come away. Why did they come away? It was not such a thing that they had entered their houses to vandalize. It was just sound coming out of the mosques. My question got resolved in 95, when the Sari Sharif unfortunate incident happened, and there was total curfew all over the valley. I was living in Gupkar at night. Late at night, suddenly there was a blast of noise from the mosque in Sonowar. हम क्या चाहते हैं निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा. We got up, my wife and I.
Was it हम क्या चाहते आज़ादी और हम क्या चाहते निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा?
हम क्या चाहते निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा भी एंड हम क्या चाहते आज़ादी भी, दोनों स्लोगन्स हमको सुनाई दिए सडनली. तो हम हड़बड़ा के उठे. तो हमने सोचा कोई जुलूस आ रहा है, क्योंकि कर्फ्यू तो है, मगर जो कर्फ्यू तोड़ के कोई जुलूस आ रहा है, पता नहीं कहाँ जा रहा है. फिर हम जो थोड़ी बहुत देखे, रुके. Then we realized that this was noise. This was coming out from a tape recorded. This was a tape recorded thing. Then we got. So then I thought with myself, this is a tape recorded thing that had frightened me so much. But on the night of 19 January 1990, when this noise was emanating from every mosque in the city, it must have definitely been a frightening scenario. So there was no option for them but to leave.
But by and large, Kashmiri Muslims were not against Kashmiri Pandits.
No, not at all, not at all.
But then successive governments have tried for the reconciliation. Why they have failed to bring back the Kashmiri Pandits?
You see, the uprooting is a very painful thing. Uprooting from your environment, losing your material possessions, losing your house, and for no reason. That is why, and the youth especially, those who are post-90 born youth of Kashmir as well as of Kashmiri Pandits, that is the generation that needs to be handled, because the older generation has reconciled in the sense that whatever has happened, they've been able to allow their wounds to heal, and they have no hatred in their minds. They've said this happened. The Kashmiri Muslim neighbors also couldn't help. Civil society also couldn't stop. But now let's move on. But then the youth,
the new generation,
post 90 born
of Kashmiri Pandits,
Kashmiri Muslims, post 90 born, they harbor hatred for each other. The post 90 born Kashmiri Muslim has seen only bloodshed. He has seen his relatives getting killed. His vocabulary has changed. He has heard of Kalashnikov. He has heard of cordon search operation. He has heard of curfew. And he has seen convoys, army convoys on the streets, and frightening atmosphere. And he's been told that India is an occupation force and the Kashmiri has been oppressed. So because for him, there's no benchmark. He doesn't know that before 90, Kashmir was not like what it was after 90. So he's harboring that hatred.
So what is the way forward for reconciliation?
What is the way forward?
For the reconciliation between the two communities?
The way forward is for both to forget what happened and stop the blame game. A tragic thing happened. The Kashmiri Pandit got displaced, and he was hurt not only by the uprooting, but he was hurt by the fact that he was told that you were made to leave. You were made to leave under a plan which involved taking you out of the valley and demolishing the Kashmiri Muslim. This is what he was accused of. without realizing that nobody would leave his house, his orchards, at the behest of anyone to come and to live in tents and get bitten by scorpions and snakes and suffer heat strokes uh, for whatever cause. He wouldn't do that. So that aggravates the pain. That
So reconciliation between the two communities is the need of the hour.
it is the need of the hour.
Sir, but
But
how do you fit in movies like Kashmir Files in such a scenario?
you see, Kashmir File is a movie made by a movie maker, producer, director. He has highlighted the facts. He has not invented facts. What he has shown really happened, but he is a creative person, so he dramatized those facts.
But
But
don't you think such movies create more wedge between the communities?
exactly, the point is the movie as such did not create so much commotion. It was the attempt by certain people to use it as a propaganda tool. You see, when requests were made from many quarters that this film should be seen, this film should be seen, an impression went around that probably an attempt is being made to humiliate the whole Muslim Kashmiri Muslim community, which is not the intention. The point is a pure and simple movie made to highlight certain facts which were not known because I believe there was social media the way it has been now. In the 90s, migration would not have happened. The whole community would have got up, people would have come in and stopped it. But it happened and it didn't get publicity. Many people didn't know that this has happened. So when Kashmir Files came, it shook the conscience of the world as a hope. Hua kya? But I don't think the intention was to demonize the whole Kashmiri
But
community.
it has demonized,
It has,
whether
because
intention was there or not.
it
But
has,
it
it has,
has
it
further
has,
dented the Kashmiri Muslim
it
image.
is created because the film was celebrated many times, places. It's unfortunate, but I think a distinction has to be drawn between the killing of Kashmiri Pandits and the killing that took place after militancy erupted of the Kashmiri Muslim who was killed, uh, was killed for being an informer or an alleged informer of the government of India or of the agencies. The Kashmiri Pandits, many of them, were killed also for being informers. So that was common between the killings. But the ethnic cleansing, that 432 odd, that is a documented number, Kashmiri Pandits who were killed,
612. 612.
okay, 612 were killed only because they belonged to a particular community. So that distinction has to be drawn. We're saying Kashmiri Muslims are also killed. Of course, they were killed. They were killed, but not because they were Muslims, but because they were seen to be informers. There were Kashmiri Pandits, many Kashmiri Pandits like Lasakol. He was a director of Doordarshan. He was seen as an agent of India. There were some IB people who were killed because they were seen to be informers. So that is a common factor. But the killing of Kashmiri Pandits was what is now generally accepted as ethnic cleansing. A particular community should be not allowed to stay there because you are thinking of a Nizam Mustafa, where non-Muslim cannot live.
How has 2019 changed things for the Kashmiri Pandits?
Beg your pardon?
2019, August 5th, 2019 decision, the reading down of the special status. How has that changed the Kashmiri Pandit?
Oh, do you see any change? Do you see any change? In what way would he be changed? He is a displaced person. He,
The killings have again started now, but
in, in,
post August 5th,
in what way?
the killing of Kashmiri Pandits.
Yeah, 370, 370.
Has actually the reading down of special status helped the Kashmiri Pandit community in any? manner.
The Kashmiri Pandit community has not been helped in any way. But in any case, they removed
Then why did the community celebrated reading down of special status?
well, so much happened to the mindset of the Kashmiri Muslim and the Kashmiri Pandits because of the eruption of militancy. So much misinformation, so much hatred, so much intolerance developed because of certain rumors, because of certain gossip, because of certain things that collectively distorted the thinking of the communities, which led to a trust deficit, which led to a gap. The Kashmiri Pandit thought that the whole Kashmiri Muslim community was behind his exodus. That indirectly all Kashmiri Muslims were willing, complicit in the exodus of the Kashmiri Muslim.
Sir, my last question before we wind up this intriguing interview. Do you think that the Kashmiri Pandits should come and stay in those enclosed enclosures in Kashmir Valley?
Today, you see who's staying there. The employees who were made to go there under an employment package because they were educated people. They didn't get jobs outside the rest of the country like so many others. So a special package was involved for them, and they were recruited amongst themselves. The Kashmiri Pandits competed, and they were sent there, and they have been working since 2010 very harmoniously with their colleagues of the Muslim colleagues. They've been cordial, and they've done well for 12 years. And suddenly, why did this happen? Why did one Mr. Rahul Bhatt get killed and others got targeted? The reserved category people, the Jammu people, the non-Muslims who were working there. Obviously, with the abrogation of 370, that fear that this was an attempt to change the demography of Kashmir got entrenched in the minds of the people. But then they told themselves that that cannot happen. Why should anyone come in? And then this domicile rule came along, and that also assuaged the feelings that those who have not lived here for less than 15 years cannot get any jobs here, and that they cannot get any that. But again, in the killing, behind the killing, I find that the resurgence of the same mood, the same feeling that led to the killing of Kashmiri Pandits in 1990. That Kashmiri Pandits seem to have come to stay in Kashmir because they've been here now for 12 years and they're almost settled. They're looking for some land to build houses. So they should not be allowed to do that. That otherwise there should be no reason because there was no provocation for the Kashmiri Muslims.
But should the community put in the closed enclosures,
They're living in what they call transit camps, but
transit
there are
camps?
6,000 flats being mailed, which are two-room flats, where they will get shifted once they are ready. And there they can get security and all that.
But is that the solution in the larger perspective?
You see, there are two views within the community. One that what happened to the community uh, can happen again because it's happened seven times in the past. But they need some kind of a security which they can get only if they all live together in clusters. That's one viewpoint. The other is homeland, that we will all go back to live at one place where we'll be able to strengthen our cultural identity, religious identity, where we'll get security. And once we live in that homeland, we'll seek political empowerment. There's no consensus on this among the community, but the consensus is that the community cannot go back to the villages and the kasbahs, the towns that they were forced to leave. Because, first of all, they've sold most of their land, most of their property. Secondly, nobody will recognize them there. That generation with whom they grew up, that has passed on, or And that by living amongst the Kashmiri Muslims in the kasbahs and the villages, they may endanger their lives also. So the feeling is that because we have been uprooted from the land that belonged to us, where we were living before anyone else, we have to go back. We should go back. So the Kashmiri Pandit diaspora, Kashmiri Pandit living in the rest of the country, Kashmiri Pandit living here, says that he has to go back, but on his own terms and at the time of his choosing. But I personally believe that there is need for reconciliation and somebody has to take the initiative from both sides. And who does that? Somebody from Kashmir who has an image of being a person.
Shall these be the political leaders or the religious
No,
leaders
no.
from both the communities?
I don't think political leaders will help.
Religious leaders?
Religious leaders will also not help. Social activists who have gone through the pain of militancy in Kashmir, who have seen the disruption in their lives there,
From both the communities.
from the both, and the Kashmiri Pandits who got uprooted. Now, we'll have to choose some people from both communities who are prepared to move on and whose wounds have healed, and they are in a position to be reasonable, in a position to be able to discuss what happened in a sober mood. That's a difficult job because once if you start writing the history of Jammu and Kashmir after 1990, it will be difficult because whoever the historian may be, if he belongs to the state, he'll be too close to events to be able to write objectively. So the historian has to have a distance from events to be objective.
We need to write the history very objectively.
Very objectively. And objectively, that can be done only if you have a mind which is prepared to look at things without subjective
From a
involvement.
rational perspective.
Without subjective involvement. You may have been uprooted, your house may have been vandalized, but are you in a position to forget that and say, okay, we'll talk about how we go back? At the moment, it's very difficult for the community of Kashmiri Pandits to forget what happened to them.
Mr. Bakaya, I do hope that we find that open mind which can reconcile both the communities. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Please subscribe to our channel Reportage and press the bell icon to remain updated.